All right, wonderful. Good afternoon, Friday afternoon. Thank you for being here with me. My name is Esther or Ester Sihite. I use she and her pronouns, and I serve as interim director for the Office for Inclusion, Belonging, and Intergroup Communication. I'd like to invite you to do something with me. I'd like you to say out loud, I matter and I belong here.
I matter. I belong here.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like you to turn to someone near you and say, you matter and you belong here.
You matter. You belong here. You matter. You belong here. We all belong here.
Wonderful. Well, if you're like me, articulating and hearing those messages feels refreshingly validating, but also feels a little weird and uncomfy to broach here in this academic and workplace setting. Yes, even at a conference on belonging and wellness. In my work with students, I try to incorporate into why and what and how I communicate with them the sentiment that they matter, that they belong, that they deserve the conditions in place to flourish academically and beyond. I imagine that we share this interest as educators to foster a sense of belonging among those whom we teach. But how often have we explored the question of how we, as educators, experience a sense of belonging ourselves in our work and in our institutional settings? How does it impact our well-being, our ability to thrive, succeed, and to teach effectively? By way of my role on campus, I've spent some time co-constructing the meaning of belonging amid the work of co-leading educational interventions in this and related areas among students, staff, and faculty. As I got further into the exploration of belonging, I couldn't help but wonder about and reflect on its seeming role on my own experiences as an educator, as well as those of others at the university whose stories I'd come to learn. In this talk, I share with you some key takeaways from these reflections and early research, which I hope will facilitate reflection on the role of belonging in your own experiences and how we might be able to cultivate belonging in our shared spheres of work. Does that sound all right? Cool. First off, let's explore what belonging means. It seems to have become something of a buzzword lately, having entered the discourse on diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example. In everyday use of the word, belonging seems to be defined as how well one fits into an environment or setting. The Oxford Dictionary defines belonging as an affinity for a place or situation. Well beyond these baseline definitions, however, there are a number of critical and fascinating elements of belonging that I think often go underexplored and underemphasized. Here are two definitional understandings of belonging that I really appreciate. According to Greg Walton and Shannon Berry, researchers here at Stanford, belonging is a kind of relationship that a person has with a setting, reflected in an evaluation of who they are or who they can become, and what the setting allows or can allow. It's an assessment of being accepted, included, respected in, and contributing to a setting, or anticipating the likelihood of developing this feeling. Importantly, Walton's research, which has largely been on college students, suggests that sense of belonging facilitates motivation, achievement, health, and well-being. Bearing some similar framing, Terrell Strayhorn, a researcher of college student belonging, surmised the following: that sense of belonging is a basic human need and a fundamental motive enough to influence behaviors. And it takes on heightened importance in certain contexts, such as when a person is new to a setting or environment and among certain populations that may experience historical and contemporary forms of marginalization. For example, through large-scale studies, Strayhorn found that women and male students of color felt less of a sense of belonging than their white male counterparts in STEM fields across universities, which he found significantly relates to academic variables like persistence within their majors or even non-academic ones like self-esteem. However, he also found that a sense of belonging isn't stagnant, and it's mediated by factors such as having positive interactions with diverse peers and having even just one faculty member who demonstrated care and investment in them, and that these could lead to other positive outcomes and behaviors such as engagement, achievement, happiness, and pro-social behaviors among students. Beyond the context of higher education, there have been some compelling findings on the significance of belonging on people's work experiences across varied industries. Authors of a Harvard Business Review article in 2019 reported findings from research that actually quantified the value of workplace belonging and found that a high degree of belonging was linked to a 50% increase in job performance, a 50% drop in turnover risk, 75% reduction in sick days, and 167% higher likelihood of an employee recommending their company to others. While not entirely surprising, these findings are fascinating to me. I'm captivated by how belonging seems to correlate with people's engagement, growth, satisfaction, and perhaps even health and well-being across the range of workplace settings. And here's the thing. I think we can extrapolate many, if not all of these findings to our own experiences and the significance of belonging to us as educators. I believe that we too have a fundamental need to know that we matter to a group or community, to feel respected, valued, supported, and to have a kind of reciprocal relationship to our organizational setting that is the baseline of our thriving. But just like both Walton and Strayhorn's research suggests, dynamics that foster belonging don't come close to being automatic, even in settings in which we aspire for things like higher learning, collaboration, innovation. They require active design and redesign, maintenance, tending to, and addressing how dynamics of inclusion and exclusion, power, privilege, and oppression can influence differences in how people experience belonging. I recently began a pilot study that explores sense of belonging as experienced by educators who hold one or more marginalized identities and who pursue and/or lead justice-centered work in their university roles. While still exploratory in nature and based on a small number of responses, the themes that have risen from these have been insightful. Asked what elements of their experiences at Stanford have contributed to a sense of belonging for them, a number of folks highlighted their interpersonal relationships with select individuals who share common values, interests, or identities, and with whom they felt seen, heard, cared for, valued, and validated. And here's what's particularly compelling. They described either directly or indirectly that these dynamics and interactions were exceptions to many of their experiences at Stanford. What I resonated with, was sobered by, and inspired by, is that these educators went out of their way to find and cultivate spaces for belonging among colleagues who, both within their immediate workspaces and beyond. One noted that this was needed because, quote, there are not a lot of structured or structural opportunities for like-minded people of marginalized backgrounds to gather and find a sense of community and safety in the midst of an otherwise oppressive and biased institution. What I've reflected upon in interacting with these responses and drawing upon my own research and practice is that Stanford is not unique in these struggles. Higher education at large is, as the kids might say, a bit of a dumpster fire now and historically. And we are contending deeply and messily with issues of diversity, equity, justice, belonging, and more. But quoting one of my favorite educators and authors, Paulo Freire, just as objective social reality does not exist by chance, but as the product of human action, so it is not transformed by chance. Asked what they thought would contribute to a sense of belonging as experienced by educators who hold marginalized identities, the respondents to my survey noted the importance of creating communities to talk about what folks are experiencing, to heal and uplift each other's work, and one highlighting the approach of having, quote, more active ways to fund, uplift, support, and amplify voices of marginalized identities to be more visible and integral to leadership, decision-making, and strategy forming across the university. Another educator said, if Stanford were to allow for a more justice-centered learning environment, provide staff with more time to connect with one another and do continuing education, and recognize that systemic changes are necessary and not to delegate change to individuals, I'd feel more belonging and want to belong. Take a breath with me if you'd like. So, short-term, long-term, in big ways and small ways, what can each of us do to foster a sense of belonging among ourselves and others in this organizational space? First, I invite you to reflect on this very topic. How do you experience belonging at work? Give it space, give it validity, name its importance for you and others. 2, think about the micro moments in your interpersonal interactions with students and colleagues alike that could have an impact on their or your own sense of belonging. At the start of this talk, I introduced myself to you as Esther or Ester, and the former is how many of my friends and most others call me here in the US and predominantly English-speaking contexts. Ester is how my family calls me, my immediate family in Seattle and my extended family in Indonesia. A number of years ago, in an event similar to this, one at my former institution, a colleague and faculty member offered up a dual pronunciation of her name in front of a very large group. And it was the first time I'd ever witnessed that. And I noticed how it felt, and I took away from it permission to also introduce myself in the same manner moving forward. 3, seek to build opportunities for authentic community building and/or coalescing around innovative and collective change efforts. An exemplar I learned about recently is an active committee in the computer science department that examines how their physical spaces can better foster inclusion. How awesome is that? Formally and informally, I hope you find meaningful opportunities to connect with others where you can affirm each other's humanity and cultivate spaces for mutual belonging. And an invitation and shameless plug to do this very thing, join other staff, faculty, and fellow Stanford educators at a workshop to explore this topic more deeply. It will be designed and facilitated by other fantastic team members in the Office for Inclusion, Belonging, Intergroup Communication, or IBIC for short, and myself. June 27th, reflection, storytelling, and food will be had. Find more info and register on our website at ibic.stanford.edu. Finally, leaders. Encourage, support, and be a champion for these kinds of spaces and the individuals whom you lead. The aforementioned research makes note of how even one ally or person who notices and actively includes someone can make a difference in that person's sense of belonging. In thinking about inclusive leadership, I'm reminded of the quote from Spider-Man, "With great power comes great responsibility." Thank you for listening and being in community with me.